What up, Net fans? NetsBoy here, bringing your latest, and you're somehow in the playoffs Brooklyn Nets news. So, a lot to discuss and talk about today. A lot. This could be one of my longer videos. But it's good because it's jam-packed with a lot of awesome information. And when I say awesome information, I mean just mostly my analytical opinions or whatever. There's no analytics to it at all. I don't know what I'm saying. Just my opinions. But a lot of stuff to address, a lot of stuff to look at moving forward with this NBA season and the Nets moving forward, entering the playoffs. First things first, the last 2 weeks of the season was very frustrating for the Nets. They were there, they were looking good, they were right there in the 7th seed actually, and then had two of the worst losses you could ever have against the Bucks and against the Bulls, and went into the last game of the regular season, actually a full game behind the Pacers, and they needed the Pacers to lose to the Grizzlies, and the Nets needed to beat the Magic. And by some miracle, that actually happened. The Grizzlies beat the Pacers, and the Nets beat the Magic, and the Nets snuck in with a 38-44 record, snuck in to the playoffs in the East. So that's pretty neat. I'm going to be honest. I mean, if I want to take a step back and look at the original NetsBoy episode where I had my Eastern Conference predictions, I don't ever like to admit that I'm wrong. But this season in particular, I have been wrong about almost everything when it came to predictions. I mean, there's some things I've been dead on. Like I said that the Nets would play better when, I was dead on with Brook Lopez. The Nets need to keep Brook Lopez, and he's the key to the Nets' success, and so on and so forth. This is him and Darren Williams. And, and I was, right to say, that I didn't think the Miami Heat were going to make the playoffs. I said that. I said they were going to be a wild card team. I didn't think they were going to make it. I was right about that. And I was right about a couple things, but I was also dead wrong about a lot of things too, and I will admit that. And I think the biggest thing I was dead wrong about was the Nets' record. I said that they were going to be the 3 seed, and I said they were going to be about 48 to 52 wins. Well, and then I went through a long rant, and I said that there's no such thing as a sure bet in Vegas, because remember Vegas said it was above or under 41.5 for the Nets. And I said, there's not such a thing as a sure bet in Vegas, but I would definitely bet above 41.5 wins for the Nets. Thank God I didn't actually do that, because I would have lost. But, when you look at this Nets team and this season for the Nets, it really just kind of epitomized what the problem has been with this team really throughout, since they moved to Brooklyn, really. I mean, even back when they were in New Jersey, but since they moved to Brooklyn, and that's consistency. There's one consistent player on the Nets, and that's Brook Lopez. And he's only consistent when he's healthy. I mean, look at him. When Lopez has his worst games, he's still a factor. His worst games, he's still putting up, 15-ish points and apparently getting around like 7 rebounds and blockers. Like, he's still decent when he's having his worst games. But then people like Darren Williams, Joe Johnson, Bojan Bogdanovic, Jarrett Jack, Mason Plumlee, these guys are either have good games or bad games. And that is just can't happen. You need to play consistent. Thaddeus Young has been a great pickup. He's played relatively consistent for the Nets, but he was never a star player. When your 3 star players, Lopez, Williams, and Johnson, are inconsistent, or in this case, 2 of the 3 are inconsistent, your team is going to struggle, and that is what happened with the Nets. And that is why they won 38 games. That is why this team did things like beat the Cavaliers, and they beat the Warriors, and they beat some of the best teams, but then they would get blown out by the Bucks and so on and so forth in a game that they needed to win. They're inconsistent. And that is really what separates the great teams from the okay teams, really. And so the Nets snuck into the playoffs undeservingly. I will admit that. I mean, tough luck for the Thunder. The Thunder If they took the top 16 teams, the Thunder would be in the playoffs and the Nets would not. But actually, everyone else would still be in. The Celtics would be the 16th seed at 40 and 42. And the only difference is that the Thunder would be in. So the Thunder are the team that got a little shafted. There's always one team in the West, at least one team in the West that gets shafted. But in this case, it was just the Thunder. Last year it was the Suns. This year it's the Thunder. And like last year, the Hawks made it when they didn't deserve it. This year the Nets made it when they didn't deserve it. But whatever. 38 and 44. If I were to give a grade on every single player on the Nets, it would be very bad, except for really Lopez. He'd be the only one who I'd probably give like an A- to. I'm not gonna go into all that. I could sit here and say Darren Williams, I gave this grade, Joe Johnson, this. I'm not gonna do that. I might do that when, and I'll say if and when, but I'm gonna be more realistic, and I'll say when the Nets lose. When the Nets get eliminated, I might have a big wrap up in which I grade every player and everything I see and what I want the Nets to do moving forward. I'll probably do that when, hypothetically, if, not hypothetically, but you know what I mean. I should say when and if the Nets get eliminated, because theoretically they could win the championship, but let's be honest, they're not going to. I've been wrong about a lot of things this season, but I don't think I'll be wrong about that. Actually, fun fact. I don't know if you read the article, but there was analytics. Whatever the whole metrics of putting in numbers and calculating statistical stats, statistical. God, what the hell? You know what I mean? Analytical people who put in, equations and mathematical statistics to try to determine the outcome of sporting events. The analytics. There we go. The analytics was done, or analytical people did the NBA playoffs and gave the Nets a 10% chance of advancing out of the first round. I believe that. Also, they did these hypothetical simulations. And they did 10,000 of those simulations. So they basically played every possible outcome mathematically and equationally based off of statistics, sabermetrics, and all those fancy things. And only one of the 16 playoff teams never came up as the NBA champions. They did this 10,000 times to try to come up with as many variables as possible. Through the 10,000 times, only one team of the 16 did not win a championship any of those 10,000 times, and that was the Brooklyn Nets. So, that's right, fans. If the Nets play 10,000 games, replayed this playoff series 10,000 times, according to the statistics, they would never win the championship. So, whatever, but I just think that's kind of funny, and I'm not even going to disagree. I mean, let's be honest, they don't deserve to be there, but whatever, they're there, and okay, let's go. I'm going to root for them, that's for sure. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed and hope for the best. But, moving forward, like I said, Nets made the playoffs. I did expect them to at least make the playoffs. They snuck in there. 38 and 44, that's a pretty disappointing season, but I'll take it. So, like I said, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the Nets season right now, but what I will do is go into each playoff matchup and give what I think will happen. Not just the Nets, but the playoffs in general. We'll start in the East, and I will talk about the main one, and I'll talk about that more in depth. The Hawks versus the Nets. Like I said, the analytics say the Nets have a 10% chance of winning. Hawks are 90% favorites. That is the biggest difference, percentage-wise, of all the matchups. I agree. I think the Hawks swept the Nets. They basically dominated, except for the last game they played where the Nets battled back, but they were down most of that game. Look, the Hawks aren't going to lose this series. Basically, I will be happy if the Nets don't get swept. I'm predicting the Nets will win one game. I think the Nets will shock the Hawks one of the 4 games. when everything clicks for them. Because look, we've seen games where everything is clicked for the Nets, and when everything clicks for the Nets, they beat good teams. They've beaten the Cavaliers, they've beaten the Bulls, they've beaten the Raptors, they've beaten the Warriors. They've beaten the Trailblazers. They've beaten good teams when everything clicks. So I think the Nets will win one of those games. I'm going to say Atlanta in 5. And you know what? I'm not going to be all discouraged. As long as the Nets are competitive and actually play hard in every single game and don't just get blown out, I'll be okay. I want them to, and if they win one game. If the Nets win one game and play competitive in all 5 of the games, I'll be okay. I'll say, you know what? We knew this wasn't going to go anywhere. That's not terrible for what has happened for them this season, and I will chop that off and say we'll just look at next year. So that's what I'm thinking, though. I'm thinking the Nets can steal one. I think it'll be a 5-game series, but obviously the Hawks will win. Cavaliers versus the Celtics. I'm going to say this is going to be a sweep, but I also think there's a possibility it can go 6 games. Now, I know you're saying, NetsBoy, how could you have such a variable, 6 games to a sweep? And that's because the Celtics are one of those teams, kind of like the Nets. You have no idea what the hell they're going to do. They've played very well down the stretch, but I feel like their lack of experience and lack of LeBron James-ish, lack of LeBron James will play a part on that. I know the Celtics beat the Cavaliers last time they played, and Evan Turner had something to say. I don't remember that whole story. But that was a game that meant nothing to the Cavaliers. So I think the Cavaliers are going to really sweep the Celtics. But the Celtics have enough kind of under-the-radar talent to maybe shock and actually make it a 6-game series. But I'm going to say that's going to be a sweep. I can't buy the Celtics, especially against the Cavaliers. And I feel like LeBron James, this is when LeBron James shows up to play, as much as he possibly can, So I think that's going to be a sweep. But it could go 6 games, But definitely no matter what, the Cavaliers will win that series. Milwaukee versus Chicago. Similar thing. I think 5 games to a sweep. I do not buy the Bucks. I never bought the Bucks. The fact the Nets got blown out by the Bucks still gets me really mad. But the Bulls are better, especially if Derrick Rose is really going to stay and back like he is right now and doesn't get hurt again. I think the Bulls will win that in 5. I'll give the Bucks 1 game because they too can play pretty well. And then the good series, the Raptors versus the Wizards. That's going to be the most competitive series, but I'm definitely taking the Raptors in 6. I mean, the Raptors are a better team. The Wizards are a good team, but I don't think they're that great. I don't think the addition of Paul Pierce was that big of a deal. I think that it made them a little bit better mentally. John Wall is too inconsistent offensively. Bradley Beal has games where he just disappears. Nene can't stay healthy. Gortat is good. I just don't buy into the Wizards. The Raptors, I really like the Raptors. I've always liked the Raptors. I think that they are a very good team. I feel like they got a lot of experience last year, losing in 7 games to the Nets. The Raptors have to do with Kyle Lowry. Listen, the Raptors didn't end the season that well, but that was because Kyle Lowry was hurt for most of the end of the season. If Lowry could come back and play well, that team is set. I mean, he's their best player. I know DeMar DeRozan might be their best player, but to me, Lowry is the engine that makes that team go. And I think that if Lowry comes back healthy, plays well, I think the Raptors can make a lot of noise in the Eastern Conference. I actually think they're going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals. I think that because they're going to play the Hawks most likely, I think the Raptors are going to beat the Hawks. I think it's going to be competitive. I think it's going to be 7 games, and I think the Raptors are going to beat the Hawks. I think it's going to be Raptors, Cavaliers. I'm saying it. Raptors, Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference Finals. I think the Cavaliers will prevail. If you remember, I said the Cavaliers would represent the East last year. I had Nets Cavaliers in my thing, but I'm sticking with the Cavs. I think it's going to be Cavaliers, Raptors, and I think the Cavs will prevail. That's the East. Now let's go to the West. First matchup, Golden State, New Orleans. New Orleans, you did a great job making the playoffs. 45 and 37. You be the 6th seed in the East. You're not beating the Warriors, and I think it's going to be a sweep. I think the Warriors will sweep the Pelicans. I mean, it's going to be a good game. It's a good game, probably competitive, but I'm going to say Warriors will sweep that. Houston, Dallas. Dallas is going to win that. And the reason is I, once again, don't buy into Houston. I know James Harden was, played so well, and Dwight Howard, whatever. I don't buy Houston either, and I think Houston will lose to Dallas in 7 games. It's going to be a 7-game series. I think the Mavericks are a very good team. I know Rondo has apparently caused some problems, but I am going to say Dallas will beat Houston in 7 games. Clippers, Spurs. I'm taking the Spurs. You can't go against the Spurs. I don't believe in the Clippers either. I think that team is also very inconsistent. I don't think that people like Blake Griffin are that great players. I think they're a bit overrated. DeAndre Jordan can't make free throws. Chris Paul is great. JJ Redick's having a great season. But I just do not buy into the Clippers, and the Spurs are the Spurs. The Spurs ended on such a great streak at the end of the season. I know they lost the last game of the season, but they went 9-1 their last 10 games. And you can never go against the Spurs against playoff time. So the Spurs are going to beat the Clippers in 6. Memphis versus Portland. One of these weird situations in which Portland is the 4 seed, despite actually having the 6th best record, but because they won the division, they have to be a top 4 seed. Even though I believe Memphis has home court advantage, which is kind of strange in my opinion. Why not just let Memphis... I don't know. I guess because they have to be a top 4 seed because they won the division. But if they got to be a top 4 seed, shouldn't they also have home court advantage? But no, because the Grizzlies have a better record, so they make that. It's really weird. I never really realized that until now. But Grizzlies versus the Trailblazers, the Grizzlies are going to win. And I'm going to say it's going to be about 5 games. The Trailblazers are too beaten up. No Batum, no Wesley Matthews. I don't know if LaMarcus Aldridge will be back. It's going to go 5 games. They might win 1 game, but the Grizzlies are too good. And I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say Vince Carter is going to have a very steadily good postseason. He's been a non-factor in the regular season, mostly because of the fact that he's been hurt with that with an ankle injury for most of the year. And also, he got very sporadic minutes. He would play 22 minutes one night and then 8 minutes the next. So he never really got a good offensive rhythm. I think he's going to come out in the playoffs and really make a pretty big impact because that's what Carter does. So I think, Grizzlies will win that in 5. Grizzlies versus Warriors, I think is going to be one of the neatest series, and I'm going to say the Grizzlies will win in 7. I do. I think the Grizzlies' tough defense and their veteranness. The Warriors, they haven't been there. I mean, the Warriors were good last year, made the playoffs, but I just think the Grizzlies are too of a grinding team, and I think the Warriors will hit a wall. I think the Grizzlies will win in 7, and between the Mavericks and the Spurs are going to win. Between the Grizzlies and the Spurs, if you notice, I'm actually sticking with my predictions from the beginning of the year, minus the Nets. I said Nets, Cavaliers, Grizzlies, Spurs, and then the Cavaliers versus the Spurs. Well, now I'm saying I'm sticking with the West, Grizzlies versus Spurs, and I'm going to stick with the Spurs because until I'm proven otherwise with the way the Spurs are playing, I'm not going to ever pick against them in the finals. In the playoffs. Not until they show it. I'm not going to pick against them. So I will say Spurs will beat the Grizzlies in 6 games, and then it'll be Spurs versus Cavaliers, and I would take the Spurs again to repeat, because once again, I do not go against the Spurs until I'm given reason otherwise. I think that'll be a very competitive series. I think that'll go 6 games as well, and I think it'll be exciting. So I am predicting the Spurs to win the championship. So overall wrap-up, my Eastern Conference Finals teams, Raptors versus Cavaliers, with the Cavaliers winning. And I got Spurs and Grizzlies with the Spurs winning. Spurs versus the Cavaliers. Spurs winning the whole thing. That's my NetsBoy playoff predictions. We'll see what happens. Last year, I think I was pretty accurate with the playoff predictions. I'm going to be honest. I don't remember to an extent. I might have to go back. But I think it was pretty accurate. So, yeah. So, in conclusion, the Nets barely make the playoffs, but they're there. And I'm going to watch them. They play Sunday. And then they play Tuesday, right? Where's their schedule? They play Sunday, and then they don't play till Wednesday. That's screwy. That's interesting. They play Sunday, and then they get 2 days off, and then they play Wednesday. Then they play Saturday. Jeez. Well, I'll probably do another NetsBoy after Wednesday, after the first 2 games of the season of the series. So probably after Wednesday, probably come Thursday or Friday will be the next NetsBoy episode, and I'll discuss their first 2 games against the Hawks. Yeah, we'll see what happens. You know, the key to the Nets in this series is Darren Williams. Lopez is going to have a good game, but he's going to struggle defensively. I've noticed that Lopez struggles against centers who are quicker than him, and Al Horford is quicker than him, who also centers who can shoot the ball. Lopez tends to struggle against those guys because for some reason Lopez doesn't keep his arms up. If you ever watch Brook Lopez play defense against a shooter, it's kind of out like this. His hands are out, and he kind of goes in their face. Brooks got to put your arms up, Brook. You're 7 feet tall. Your wingspan should be 7 feet. Put your damn arms up, and you'll be a better defender. But whatever. That's my coaching, philosophy and my advice for Brook is to put his arms up when he's playing defense. But anyway, the key for the Nets, if Darren Williams can play well, and Joe Johnson can play well, the Nets can pull up a win or two in the series. Brook Lopez, I think he's going to do all right. Bogdanovic had a great game against the Magic. If he can play well, if the Nets can play well in the whole series and click, who the hell knows what could happen? But I think overall they're going to probably, like I said, lose in 5. But we'll see what happens. But the key, like I said, the key is just to get some consistency out of people like Darren Williams, Joe Johnson, Jared Jack, Boyan Bogdanovic. Those guys have got to start playing consistent. If those guys can play consistently, the Nets could pull off and make some noise in this series, and it'll be kind of neat. But that being said, I don't think it'll happen. So anyway, until next time, this is NetsBoy, getting excited for the playoffs, and signing off.